promised a look into spaces throughout the journalism building, and here's one classes don't often get to visit, the Dean's office. Our current Dean, Charles Davis, has been here since 2013. Before that, he was a professor at the University of Missouri and served as Executive Director of the National Freedom of Information Coalition. His work has included assisting journalists and members of the public with thousands of public records requests at the state and federal level. The Freedom of Information Act since 1967 has provided any member of the public the right to request records from any federal agency. It's often described as the law that keeps people in the know about their government. Federal agencies are required to disclose any information requested under the Act unless it falls under one of 9 exemptions that protect interest. Those interests include personal privacy, national security, and law enforcement. The Freedom of Information Act also requires agencies to proactively post online certain categories of information, including frequently requested reports. Journalists routinely file open records requests in their reporting of government decisions, crime coverage, and investigative projects. I've filed them for arrest reports, health data, and even conversations about property purchases to cover the stories I've reported on. Let me try to briefly make the connection between the Freedom of Information Act and the First Amendment. The U.S. Supreme Court had interpreted the First Amendment to guarantee some limited access to judicial proceedings, but not to include federal agency records. That was the case for nearly 200 years in the U.S. The press led a decade-long advocacy struggle that resulted in Congress passing the Freedom of Information Act in 1966. It is now the signature government transparency law. I stood right outside this office in our first video, underneath the sign that says Democracy's Next Generation. As I said then and repeat now, the First Amendment is vital to an informed public and American democracy. In just 45 words, the First Amendment provides for 5 fundamental freedoms: religion, speech, the press, assembly, and petition. Let's focus on freedom of the press. The First Amendment prevents Congress from making a law that restricts the press. It's essentially creating a social contract between journalists and people who live in the United States. It establishes the press as a fourth estate, given the Constitution also provides for the legislative, judicial, and executive branches of the federal government. This constitutional protection against government interference in the press allows for journalists to play a watchdog role. It also provides another constitutional check against corruption. Journalists also need to be held accountable, so as you read and view stories, pay attention to the idea of false balance. That's giving equal coverage to all ideas and perspectives, even when they're not equally supported by factual evidence or thorough reporting. When we think about the First Amendment, it is complicated though. It does not protect everything journalists do. It doesn't allow for journalists to report on any topic without legal action. It doesn't stop the Supreme Court from censoring content from a journalistic publication or organization or a station. It also doesn't only protect journalists if they overlap with other elements of the amendment, such as religion, petition, or speech. The First Amendment also does not protect against obscenity, defamation, incitement of violence, disruptive speech or expression in schools. The First Amendment tells the government what it can't do. It doesn't tell the press what it should do or how to do it. It also doesn't apply to private businesses. So the First Amendment cannot keep social media companies from enforcing community standards or removing online posts or accounts. I've given you a brief overview of the First Amendment and Freedom of Information Act, but there's more to learn in the course materials.